Okay, we are recording. Awesome.
Great. And that's 4:02. So I think I'll let you keep doing the admits, Carrie,
Hmm.
and I'll kick us off.
Yep.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, everyone, again. Hello, and welcome to the second annual Tyler Center for Global Studies Virtual Summit. We're so thrilled to have you all here. I know we have a few distinguished guests who are not able to join us live, but we are recording this program so we can be sure to share it with them later. My name is Latika Young, and I serve as both the Executive Director of the Tyler Center for Global Studies, as well as the Director of the Center for Undergraduate Research and Academic Engagement here at Florida State University. With generous support from the Tyler Foundation, the mission of the Tyler Center for Global Studies is to cultivate a community of global scholars who shape the future through research, innovation, and collaboration. By funding impactful research projects conducted beyond U.S. borders, the Tyler Center strives to contribute to an awareness of and appreciation for solutions that transcend geographical boundaries. Florida State University was delighted to partner with the Tyler Center in 2023 as the coordinating institution for the center's efforts. This past year, the Tyler Center supported 12 institutions from around the country: Austin Community College, Florida State University, Johns Hopkins University, Monroe Community College, SUNY Oneonta, Syracuse University, University of Hawaii Manoa, University of Missouri Kansas City, University of San Diego, University of Texas at Austin, University of Washington, and William and Mary. I know you can see those on the screen, but I like to read them all out so that we can really acknowledge everyone. These institutions then supported 64 Tyler Fellows. These are undergraduate researchers who conducted research, scholarship, and creative work in 37 different countries, which includes all continents except for Antarctica, so that is super exciting. And since its inception, the Tyler Center has actually supported 113 Tyler Fellows, which includes three generations of fellow cohorts to date. So very exciting. And we're not done. We look forward to continuing to support the Tyler Center's network of institutional partners and to cultivate our future cohorts of Tyler Fellows. We actually just recently closed on our call for proposals for the 2026 cohort, and we look forward to announcing those grantee institutions by the end of December, which means we'll have another cohort of Tyler Fellows coming starting in the spring. Today, at our event, we will hear presentations from one Tyler Fellow from each of our 12 institutional partners, but you can also see the innovative research that all of our 64 Tyler Fellows conducted by clicking on their name in the event program, which takes you to the database that has their individual profiles and the research materials. I wanted to mention that this afternoon's event will be facilitated by Tyler Center Program Manager Carrie Wall. She deserves special recognition and gratitude as she has been instrumental in building the fellowship among our cohort of Tyler Fellows and to developing today's event. If you're not already receiving our newsletter and or following us on our social media accounts, please use the QR codes or the links in the chat. We can post those soon to access these and find the digital program, which has, like I said, the full bios and abstracts for each presenter. So I wanted to give my final congratulations to all of our Tyler Fellows, all 64. Thanks again to our presenters who are presenting today. And then a very, very special thanks to all of you for joining us for our 2025 Tyler Center for Global Studies Virtual Summit. We are all in for a very special treat, and I will hand it over to Carrie. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Latika. And again, just a virtual round of applause to every Tyler Fellow in attendance today. Whether you're just beginning your global research journey or you kind of wrapped it up, we're very excited to celebrate you, to showcase your work, and yeah, spotlight your inquisitive, globally minded selves. So, like Latika mentioned, as the program manager, I've really been fortunate to be able to interact with these Tyler Fellows this year. Um, More than just reading their reflective blog posts or scheduling virtual meetings, I just feel fortunate to have had the opportunity to witness their passion and how they operationalize their passion in global research projects. But I wasn't the only one who gets to interact with these students. Like Latika said, the digital program shows all of the Tyler Fellows projects, their bios, what they're doing next, their preliminary work, and their final research findings. And then our blog site, which I will be sure to put in the chat, gives you a glimpse into their tales of adventure and discovery and travel. So you can see the more personal side of research through our blog site. So, to get a sense for just how impactful the global research has been for this cohort, I have a fun activity for the Tyler Fellows. Everyone, all Tyler Fellows, not just the presenters. So, I'm going to share my screen again. And if you could pull out your phones and scan the QR code, just for the Tyler Fellows, in 1 to 2 words, how would you sum up your global research experience? And we should see those results pop up live if I did everything correctly here. Oh, completely unreal. Okay, that's way more than 1 to 2 words, but okay. Loving it. Eye-opening, door-opening, life-changing, surreal, exhilarating. Oh, wild wolves, that must be Nadia. Thrilling. Loving it. All right, hopefully everyone has had a chance to put in their cool thesaurus words. Beautiful and monumental. Love it. So the next one I have for you. What was the most illuminating part of your research experience? Whether that was planning the project, doing your literature review and your preliminary research, getting to that country that you've never been before, or analyzing all that data you collected and putting something out into the world. What was the most illuminating or inspiring or exhilarating thing that was part of your research experience? Fieldwork with new communities, open-minded participants, engaging. Yes, I love the engagement. Wildlife photography and science. Oh, this QR code is definitely blocking things, isn't it? Learning how to problem solve, overcome obstacles, relationships, getting into the archives. Yasna. Oh, I love it. Performing the pieces, the culture, learning in-depth procedures. Okay. I'm loving these answers. I'm loving them. So it sounds like from the technical skills to the personal, the engagement, the relationship building, it sounds like these experiences were really transformative for you guys. So again, we're very happy to showcase this and celebrate this, especially in light of International Education Week slash International Education Month, as we like to celebrate at FSU. Um, yeah, so thank you. I'll share my screen one more time, and then we'll get into the logistics of the event. So, as Latika mentioned, we've got 12 presenters today. They're going to give you a brief overview of their research experience in their chosen country. And then we will, if time permitting, have time for a few questions from the audience. Feel free to unmute yourself or put your question in the chat. I'll be happy to read it for you if you don't want to read it yourself. And then once everyone has had the chance to present, we'll have a moderated Q&A panel at the end for those lingering questions that you still want answered. So I'll ask some questions to the presenters, and then we'll open it up to the audience for a chance to ask those final questions. Awesome. All right, well, we've got our first presenter, Naomi Rees from Austin Community College. She'll be sharing her project that she conducted in Argentina over the summer. So take it away, Naomi.
Hi, I'm Naomi. First of all, I'm in an airport, so if there's any loud, sudden noises, I apologize, and I thank you for your patience. So, I'm going to share my screen. All right. So, my project was Immigration and Argentine Tango. I was curious to know what impact immigration had on the development of Argentine tango as a dance and an art form. My rationale for this project was that Argentina experienced large waves of immigration from about 1870 to 1950. This is the same time that Argentine tango was developing as an art form. To conduct my research, I used libraries in Buenos Aires, public records online, and previously published studies on Argentine tango. One of the most helpful resources I found was actually an Argentine librarian who was able to point me towards a study about the influence of gauchos on tango. Gauchos are like the cowboys of Argentina, and they had a large impact on the way the dance is performed today. So there were large waves of immigration to Argentina. European immigration was largely between 1870 and 1950, and this map shows the levels of European-born people in Argentina. As you can see, around 1900, Argentina was about half foreign-born. There was also large levels of African immigration to Argentina from about 1535 to 1853. Most people kidnapped off the Gold Coast were brought to Brazil, Colombia, and Venezuela, as well as the Caribbean, but about 100,000 people were taken to Argentina and Uruguay. In the census of 1836, 1/5 of the capital city, Buenos Aires, identified as Afro-Porteño, so of African descent. These people brought with them their customs, one of which was candombe, which was a drumming circle and singing style. When European immigrants came in waves later, their styles mixed with things. So like candombe mixed with Andalusian Spanish music, such as flamenco, to create this style called milonga. Milonga was spread throughout the city of Buenos Aires and the surrounding area by these singers called payadores. One such singer was Gabino Ezeiza, and he was really interesting to me because he was one of the few documented Black Argentine singers. Argentina has a history of trying to downplay its African heritage and focus only on the European. But this guy, some of his songs are recorded, and they still exist in record today. Another major influence, as I mentioned earlier, were the Argentine gauchos. Many of them moved to the city after the Conquista del Desierto, which is the conquest of the desert. This was a military operation the government conducted between 1875 and 1885 to remove the native people from Patagonia and give their land to European farmers. A lot of the gauchos were of mixed race, so they were also relegated to the cities. When they moved to the cities, they brought with them their customs, such as payada, which is almost like if you think of like a rap battle with guitars, and malambo, which is a really energetic dance that influenced a lot of the steps in tango. Two of the steps were the gancho, which is where a woman kicks up her leg to grab the man's leg, and the quebrada, which means the broken step, which is a very sensual move. The quebrada was considered so provocative that it was banned in the early 20th century. The key takeaways from my project were that tango is a creation of diversity, and that an art form that Argentina is so proud of would not exist without the contributions of all these different types of immigrants. This is just a small sampling of people. I had to really pare it down, but there were so many influences that I would never have expected. The main limitations in my study were time, since I was only in Buenos Aires for 3 weeks, and my fluency in Spanish. I can have conversations, but reading academic papers and scholarly studies was a little bit trickier. So I had to either rely on Google Translate or someone who was bilingual to really help me understand what was going on. The relevance to us, USA 2025, is that immigration strengthens countries. We know this in an economic sense, but this is more in a cultural sense, showing that immigration can provide national pride and help to elevate a country's status in its own eyes. So Argentine tango is a source of national pride for Argentina to this day and heritage, but it was created by people who were coming and becoming Argentinian. So thank you for watching my presentation.
Excellent, Naomi. Thank you for sharing. Naomi mentioned she's in an airport, so we have to be mindful of her time. She's catching a flight, but are there any questions that anyone would like to put in the chat, or unmute yourself and ask the question to Naomi? I did have a lingering question. If you were given the chance to go back to Argentina with, unlimited resources or unlimited time, what would you like to include in your study?
Oh my gosh, I would love to include a lot more about the specific Eastern European groups. Argentina has mainly immigration from France, Spain, and Italy, But there were a lot of Czech and Bohemian immigrants as well, especially like in the early 20th century, who had like the polka had large influence on the way tango is performed. And I would have loved to get more into that.
Interesting. So kind of broadening the study instead of
Hmm.
going deeper into the Afro roots,
Oh,
getting
that
a
too.
fuller
Well,
picture.
everything, of course. But
Yeah.
if I had to expand one part, that would be the part I'd expand.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
All
Audrey
right.
asks,
Thank
were you
you.
able to tango yourself?
Yes, we got to go to a milonga, which is a tango event, and we also got to take tango classes, and we got to see a performance by professionals, which was amazing.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I love
You got
that.
to like participate in the research. That's very exciting.
Hmm. Yeah, highly recommend. If anyone can ever go to Buenos Aires, it's amazing.
I think we can ask one more question, but if that's it. Oh, would you recommend a study abroad experience to everyone?
Absolutely. It You can study something at home, but there's something so different about just being there and getting to experience the culture, especially like experiencing the language and the slang. That was another thing, is that a lot of the songs are sung in Lunfardo, which is like this weird blend of Spanish, West African, Italian that is the slang of Buenos Aires today. And it doesn't make any sense if you're not in the culture. Once you're there, you're like, oh, okay, I get why this is all connected and why the dance looks like this and why the songs sound like this. So I don't know. Yeah, it's different. It gives you a different perspective.
Something that you just have to be there to get. Gotcha. Well, thank you so much, Naomi. That was a fantastic presentation. Um, for those watching the recording or who are monitoring the chat, the digital program is linked in the chat if you would like to read the specifics on Naomi's project. And it also links to our website where you can view her final product, her research product. All right. Awesome. Well, moving on to our next presenter, we have Blake Wilson. If you would like to share your screen and take it away.
Hello everyone. There we go. Alrighty. Let me see if I can get this to work with me here. All right, perfect. So, all right. Hello, and welcome to Rituals and Remains, a study of ancient religions and those that observe them. My name is Blake Wilson. I'm a sophomore at Syracuse University studying anthropology and history with a focus on ancient archaeology and the cultures therein. Today's question: how do the grave goods and burial architecture reflect the religious practices and beliefs of these ancient cultures? Before we actually dive into the project itself, I want to talk about some of the inspiration I had for the work. Months ago, I read an article about a World War II German soldier's burial who was found in northern Poland near Gdańsk. And in the burial itself, we found the body of the soldier, we found Byzantine coins, we found and even Mesolithic tools, all in the span of around 5 feet of the soldier, showing just how deep the history of this region goes, and how little of it is even known today. Before we actually dive into the actual research, I want to say thank you to both Professor Barron with the University of Wrocław and the University of Wrocław Archaeological Institute. Without them and their resources, this entire project would have been much more of an undertaking, and I would not have been able to focus on the research nearly as much. Let's dive into some of this research. Most of the work today was done with the Lusatian culture of Eastern and Central Europe. Now, these people are part of a broader European culture known as the Urnfield peoples. The Urnfield peoples themselves are interesting. They're a pan-European categorization of a culture of people who all cremated their dead and then buried the urns of those dead in large open fields, sometimes even into the thousands. As we can see here, we see an urn, we see examples of the urn fields themselves on the right, and an example of some of the urns themselves on the left. Now, in a recreation of a Lusatian burial from the 3rd century BCE, we see a clear transition from the cremation burials of the Urnfield peoples to more inhumation burials of later Iron Age and even classical peoples. Two things in particular I want to focus on: the deformed blade and the bronze jewelry. Both of these items in particular show a clear delineation from the Urnfield culture. The deformed blade itself is interesting because for 1,000 years, the Lusatian deformed blade was common among many Urnfield burials. And going 1,000 years into the future, into the year 200 BCE, we see this practice still exists. The Celtic peoples that the Romans had to deal with would bury their dead in inhumation burial style graves with bent swords, showing that the practice of the ritual deformation of the blade outlasted the actual the iconic practice of cremating the dead that gave the people, the Urnfields, their name. Showing that this practice is fluid and changes throughout history, while some practices and showing the actual meaning behind some practices. Now, why do we study this? Studying the past gives us a better understanding of the present. We have all heard this 1,000 times. But I firmly believe that studying the ancient past gives us a better understanding of ourselves today and what we do and why we do those things. But what do I know? I might be a little biased. Thank you all so much. And yeah, thank you.
Oh my gosh, that was such a cute picture. All right, little Indiana Jones. Does anyone have any questions for Blake about his research or time in Poland? Feel free to put it in the chat, unmute yourself.
Hi. Yeah, were you able to actually do any excavating while you were in Poland?
That's actually no, I wasn't able to perform any like working in the dirt, but I got a lot of private like tours of different museums. I saw a lot of direct private collections. I got to hold artifacts from 3,000 years ago and like toss them over my hands. It was a very amazing experience.
Very cool. Thank you.
How deep were the urns buried in the urn fields?
That's actually interesting. They weren't very deep. They were about like a foot to around 3 foot, but they were never buried on top of each other. So that obviously shows that there was a clear form of identification for each urn, showing that these urns, there's an urn here, and don't bury another urn on top. So we know that there is clear identification. We're not sure, but obviously 3,000 years later, this identification has gone away.
Interesting. Naomi asked two questions. One, how did studying abroad help you do your research? And the second question was, how long ago did they bend the swords? 2000 BC, 5000 BC?
Well, we can see that the practice actually began with sword deformation around, want to say 2000 BCE, with the migration of, I forget the name, but the Urnfield peoples are an old culture. They go from the early Bronze Age all the way into the late Bronze Age. So they go well past the 2000 BCE mark. So I would definitely argue that at the earliest, it'll be around 3000 BCE or 2000, around in that range. Is where we see the actual deformation of these swords, and if we go with that estimate, it lasted for almost 3,000 years. And how did my study abroad help my research? The opportunity to actually like go to these museums in person and see the tools and see the artifacts and see the individual I like seeing the individual markings on the clay pots that were made by people 3,000 years ago, and like the icons of humans and little symbols of their religion. It was an experience I would never have if I stayed in the US.
Excellent. Lots of questions for Blake. We do have to get to the next presentation, but I encourage you to keep your questions in your back pocket to ask for the Q&A portion at the end of the event. Our next presenter from Florida State University is Charlotte Stewart Tilley. So you are welcome to share your screen whenever you're ready, Charlotte.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Can everyone see? Let me make sure that it's presenting.
Taking a bit, but I think
Yeah.
it's trying. There we go.
There we go. Tallahassee Wi-Fi has been difficult this past week. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlotte Stewart Tilley, and today I'll be presenting my project on Fulbe approaches to human rights and socio-political stigma in Greater Accra, Ghana. So the first question that you might have is, who are Fulbe people? And I can answer that better if I can get to that slide. Hold my technical difficulties. Let me stop sharing and then go back. Okay. Perfect. So who are Fulbe people? Fulbe people are a historically nomadic indigenous ethnic group. They live across West and Central Africa. I was in Ghana, which is this country right here. Historically, they have been cattle herders, and as cattle herders, they encounter many communities which aren't Fulbe. So to help them encounter these communities and interact best, they practiced a code of conduct called Pulaku, which means responsibility, but it is so linked to their identity as Fulbe people that it also can mean Fulbeness in a sense. Wherever they live in West or Central Africa, as a minority, they are often targets of discrimination and violence. So in Ghana, this looks like being denied access to citizenship informally because they supposedly don't look Ghanaian enough, whatever that means, even when they're born and raised in Ghana. And they also experience intercommunity violence for the communities they cattle herd with. The central questions to my project include how Fulbe understand their discrimination and violence in the context of their code of conduct, Pulaku, and then also how they describe human rights. This project came out of a human rights course that I took, where the thesis of the project was, are human rights really so universal? We talk about universal human rights, but if they aren't equally applied to everybody in the world, then what do they even mean? So my hypothesis for this project was that they would talk about human rights in terms of the idea of capabilities, rather than an inherent sense of this is who I am a human and I have these rights, but also in the context of pulaku, which again means responsibility. I was in Ghana over the course of a month this summer, where I conducted 11 interviews with individuals and 3 separate focus groups. For these interviews, I worked with a translator. I do not speak Fulfulde or Pular, which is the language that Fulbe people speak, and so I required a translator. And I was reflecting while creating this presentation on how if I had gone with some of my original ideas, for example, to conduct interviews over Zoom, I would have left out a huge population of people that I got to interview, people that were rural or maybe didn't have access to technology. I also benefited from the very spur of the moment nature of fieldwork, where my translator or guide would meet someone on the street with me and say, okay, we're going to go interview them right now. And so to be there and to be able to ask follow-up questions that maybe my translator wouldn't have thought of if she was doing the research independently and sending the information back to me, that was incredibly helpful for me. So in terms of key takeaways from my project, this idea of capabilities became reflected in the lack of access that Fulbe people have to services. This was expressed many times when I asked people what they wanted in Ghana, what was their ideal world for how Fulbe people could live in Ghana. They wanted to receive a Ghana card, which is a national identity card in Ghana that gives you access to services and programs. And for many of them, they were prevented from doing this because of the way Ghana routinely denies them citizenship. The other phrase I heard often was peaceful coexistence. This was both spoken about in a local context, like in Ghana or in West Africa in general, but also internationally. So asking for a world where people live peacefully, no matter where they are. For my personal research, I really enjoyed interviewing Fulbe women. About 40% of my respondents were women. And unfortunately, a lot of the ethnographic research conducted on Fulbe people up until this point has excluded women, mostly because of certain gender divisions within Fulbe communities, but also just that they aren't considered as close to cattle herding or other items of interest. The big takeaway that I want you as an audience to have is to think about what human rights are and why we have them. So often, if we're thinking in a Western context, if we've grown up being told that we have universal human rights, we might not consider what that really means for us. And if we're thinking about these things, we're thinking about our access to human rights and maybe the lack of access that other people have to things that they need, we can improve outcomes for everybody, and especially people like minorities living in the global South. So that is the end of my presentation, if anyone has any questions.
Fantastic job, Charlotte. What an interesting project. If anyone has questions for Charlotte, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself.
How did you,
Oh,
go ahead. I was just going to ask how you connected with your translator in advance, and then how did you actually find your participants when you arrived?
That's a great question. So I worked with a professor that I kind of knew through my advisor, through a friend of his, through a friend of his. So it was very, there's a long chain of correspondence that took to get to the translator. But she was a grad student she was Fulbe herself, and she also studies Fulbe people in her grad program. And so I got to know her when I got to Ghana. And the first meeting between us was a little difficult because I think she maybe didn't know exactly what I wanted, and I didn't know what I wanted. So we had to really communicate well. But once we were actually working together, she often had friend of friends in her community that she was able to reach out to. And one thing I learned when I got there was that there's no Fulbe neighborhood in Accra. And so I really relied on people saying, "Oh, I know a neighbor that lives a couple streets down that you might be able to talk to." And that was surprising to me, but to actually have somebody to take me there and to make those connections was really important.
Abdallah asks, how did you separate local bias when you were in Ghana?
Yeah, so when you think of local bias, are you thinking of the bias that non-Fulbe Ghanaians are having? Because I imagine that that's what you're thinking of. So for that, I did a focus group of non-Fulbe people in order to root out bias and to think about maybe how people are thinking about them. But also, I learned very early on that it would be a bad idea for me to go into detail over what my research was and why I was in Ghana, to avoid awkward conversations about that. In terms of the research, I see a question about whether or not I'm going to continue this research. I would like to. I'm doing it as part of an honors in the major thesis. And so ideally, one day it might be an exciting part of grad school or something to come back to Ghana. I really enjoyed Ghana.
Last question was, is there any representation of Fulbe people in the government or any efforts to have representation?
Yes, actually, and especially outside of Ghana because they are such a minority in Ghana. I know that the president of Mali about 20 years ago was Fulbe. The complex part of Fulbe identity is that they are such a broad diaspora of an ethnic group that class and education level often matter when we're talking about representation. And so in Ghana, there are Fulbe people that feature prominently in the government, but I heard complaints from maybe everyday working class Fulbe people saying that they did not feel represented by them on the basis of ethnic identity.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for sharing that. Our next presenter comes from Monroe Community College. So we have Aiden Lindsay. And Aiden, when you're ready to share your screen, I'll let you take it away.
Perfect. Thank you. I think I'd have it down by now. Okay. Hello, my name is Aiden Lindsay. I am a student from Monroe Community College. I study cinema and film studies and am unofficially minoring in photography. And I had the chance to go to Paris for 10 days and study photography.
Oh, Aiden, we're not seeing the full slideshow.
Oh, that's not great. Can you see any of it?
It looks like your screen was frozen.
That's strange. Can you see it now?
It's loading.
Screen
Looks like it's
paused.
taking its time.
I'm gonna try sharing it again. That's strange. I apologize. I don't know what's wrong with this.
That's okay. We'll take a moment to get it worked out. All right, we see it again.
Okay.
If you hit the slideshow button in the top right, try that.
What?
Do you see it?
Oh, yeah. Is that better?
No, maybe you can just present it like this and go through the slides that way.
Like just here?
Yeah.
through. Okay.
If everyone's cool with that. We definitely want to see your work.
If it works, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay. I already said who I am, Aiden Lindsay, Monroe Community College. Got to study photography in Paris. So the first question, of course, would be why Paris? So France is the birthplace of photography. The first photo ever taken was the view from the window of La Grasse, this photo right here. It was photographed in Saint-Denis, which is only a train ride away from Paris. Paris itself has housed the likes of Henry Cartier-Bresson, Dora Maar, Man Ray, Claude Calhoun, so many people. I could keep listing names and it would be the entire length of my presentation. I'd still have more. Paris contains the third highest volume of art events in the entire world, a large number of which have to do directly with photography. And so my research really boiled down to two major subgroups: color and lighting and spatial constraints. The interesting thing about photographs compared to other artistic mediums is they are wholly reliant on external light. When you're seeing a photo, you're seeing light bounced off of the photo into your eye. So depending on the light you're using, you'll have a different photograph. The scarecrow displayed on the left and the scarecrow displayed on the right are the exact same photo, but one is taken outdoors and one is a digital recreation of it. The colors are just different fundamentally because they're using a different light source. Digital displays produce their own light, which makes the colors more consistent. Spatial constraints are a big problem and perhaps the most I could dig my teeth into in terms of exhibition space. Physical exhibition spaces are an inherently finite source. A traditional styling on the left has evenly spaced and evenly lit photographs, but they only take up just a small amount of wall space. A more modern approach takes up more wall space altogether, but it doesn't have that cleanness to it. So experimental spatial design has been a thing forever. Nan Goldin with the Ballad of Sexual Dependence popularized the slideshow styling. The Musée Albert Kahn on the bottom left did outdoor exhibition spaces, which allowed for more space for photographs. And somewhere like the Centre Pompidou uses its library computer lab as a digital reserve of photos. And this leads me to the apex of my research, which was the Musée Albert Kahn. Albert Kahn was a philanthropist who created this archive of the planet where he had thousands of Autochrome photos taken from across the globe from 1909 to 1931. The walls of the exhibition are just absolutely covered in photographs from head to toe. And it's really beautiful to see as this holistic thing, but really digging in and looking at photos independently is almost impossible. So the center of the exhibition is a digital reserve of all of those photos. You can scroll through them, you can read where they were taken and get information about them after the fact. And it together creates this new idea of the exhibition space, which wouldn't have been possible if it was only one or the other. Which leads me to the conclusions of my research. I was misguided initially, to be honest. I was pitting the two against each other when admittedly, when you look at exhibition spaces, the most impactful experiences I had was in an exhibition that we saw blended together the digital and the physical to create a wider exhibition space. The Musée Albert Kahn with its center reserve, the Centre Pompidou has its library computer lab, which allows you to flip through the photos in a completely different styling as the walls, and somewhere like the Jeu du Paume has these interactive exhibition experiences which wouldn't have been possible without the digital element, and they all serve to elevate the exhibition space. Thank you.
Thank you, Aiden. It sounds like you were really passionate about this project. So if there are any questions for Aiden, please feel free. Audrey asked, what other countries or cities are great hubs for photography you love to visit or research?
I've always wanted to take the route around America that was taken in The Americans. He has an entire route that he took, which has been mapped out. I would love to go see all of those places. I know there's a documentary about it, which I find really interesting. The Soviet montage style in Russia, it would be interesting to break apart that area and look through there because a lot of really fascinating early experimental photographers worked there too, which I think is really cool.
Excellent. Oscar, don't make me bust out my elementary French. Please ask that question.
I've lost most of my French too. I have little
I was
bits.
gonna ask if French knowledge was helpful for you.
Yes, yes. I had a lot of knowledge of French photo history going in. And I learned a fair bit of French before I went, enough to get along in conversation. But at the same time, not knowing a lot was kind of exciting. Uh, because it made me really focus in a way that I wouldn't have to in America. And I felt like the eye to detail with not having full knowledge of the language allowed me to have a really intense look at the photos themselves.
Audrey asks, Rochester is the home of Kodak and George Eastman. How much did this local history influence and the development of photography contribute to your research?
A lot. Very much. Going to the Eastman House was kind of the impetus of my research initially, because I was like, oh, exhibition spaces are fascinating and photo history is fascinating. And that's what sent me down the route that I did, frankly.
Are you interested in curating as a profession?
I would love to. I don't think I'd want it to be my full profession, but I would love to attempt curation at one point of a photo exhibition.
Do you have a favorite photographer?
I do. I have her book right here.
We have
Dora
exhibits.
Maar. Dora Maar is the coolest. She is my favorite photographer.
I'll make sure to look her up. And finally, oh, this is a great question. Blake says, is it more important for the museums to cater to the artist or to the public?
Artists. I think that as the public, you can engage with artistic works at the level of the artist, and it forces you to be uncomfortable at times. And I think that's important in engaging with the arts.
Excellent. Well, lots of great questions from the audience, and if you have more, please make sure to ask them in our Q&A portion, but we'll move on to our next presenter from Johns Hopkins. We have Natalie Wong, excuse me. So Natalie, go ahead and share your screen.
Can you hear me okay? Because I was kicked out of the Zoom a few minutes ago, but
We can hear you and we can see
okay,
everything.
wonderful. All right. So, hi, my name is Natalie. I'm a senior at Johns Hopkins University studying English and also film and media studies. As a Tyler Center Fellow, I traveled to several locations in the UK this summer, England, to research my project, Female Spectatorship and Filmic Writing in Early British Cinema. So I chose this topic because I'm someone who has personally had my life really changed by cinema and found community in modern day cinema culture. So I've always really been interested on the academic side in questions about intermediality, adaptation, fan reception, and archival and material culture. So all of this sort of culminated in this project. And I wanted to learn more specifically about the history of female written fan work in the UK. Just because the UK is so different from America, from very Hollywood congested America, and I wanted to learn more about the differences there. My first archival visit was to the Bill Douglas Cinema Museum in Exeter, England. This was also the site containing the bulk of my materials that will be analyzed in my research paper. Bill Douglas, serving as both an archive and a public-facing museum, housed like countless fan magazines, merchandise, novels, letters, games. And here I specifically wanted to look at original creative writing, or I wanted to see if original creative writing existed from women who weren't maybe already published or established authors. And I wanted to look at silent film novelizations and works submitted to the poetry section of fan magazines, most popular of which was the 20th century magazine Picture Goer. I also looked at first editions of female-penned criticism, particularly that of the modernist poet H.D., published in one of the first serious film criticism circulations called Close Up. My second location was the BFI, the British Film Institute in London, where I used their screening room, which houses a wealth of accessible titles. And I also used their research library to look at secondary literature, and to further contextualize some of the materials that I examined in Exeter. The third archive was the Keep, which is located in Brighton and Hove and contains one of the largest collections of materials related to the writer Virginia Woolf. Her seminal essay, The Cinema, is very famous and also influenced a lot of my thinking about my topic. So I was curious to see if there were any materials relating to the films and texts that influenced her day to day. And my final archive was the Bodleian at the University of Oxford, where I requested and looked at materials pertaining to studios, filmmakers, advertisers, executives, and screenwriters. So my time here helped contextualize again the culture surrounding British cinema as a business, and therefore how the original poems and novels that I was looking at Exeter were written both as a response to and sometimes as a departure from commercialization. So I'm ending on an image of one of the poems in one of the fan magazines because I really like the illustration. But my final thoughts were that I'm still in the process of thinking through and writing a paper based on these materials, but I want to ultimately examine how women audiences responded to, reinterpreted, and actively interacted with cinematic texts and cinematic culture through the transition to sound cinema. And by analyzing these transformative works and written reception in the form of letters, criticism, poetry, and magazine excerpts, I want to write something that explores the possibilities of fan culture as an active form of engagement and resistance, and how historically women were able to actively participate in literary creativity and community, specifically here in amid interwar Britain through film culture. So thank you for listening to my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have
Thank
a
you,
question.
Natalie.
Is there a film and or films that kind of inspired you to go down this route of research?
Ooh, so that's a really good question. In the spring, I got unexpectedly really into silent cinema. So I watched a bunch of really short silent films. One was called Suspense from 1913, and it's by Louise Weber, and she's an early female filmmaker. And it's like one of the earliest mystery slash suspense films of all time, and it's written by a woman and directed by a woman. And I was just like, there's a hidden history here of women in film culture. So I was like, what about the flip side to that? So people who weren't making films but were responding to them.
Maya asks, in the archives, what material did you resonate with the most?
Hmm. I think because I really like poetry, I really loved reading through what they called Kinema Carols, which were a section of magazines where consumers were able to send magazines like their own original poetry. And I thought it resonated with me just because I think if I were alive at the time, I'd be one of those people sending poems to magazines. And it's just like a super endearing way to see how audiences were responding at the time and like watching movies, thinking about movies, but also like thinking about them so much that they'd go home and write a poem about it.
What was your favorite original piece of writing that you found? I guess that's fine.
So I have it on the next slide. Um, this is a poem by just literally an anonymous, or not an anonymous, May Howard Gwynne, but who was just presumably a woman in Britain who I wasn't able to find any historical information about. And she was just one of the many people who submitted poems to Picture Goer. And I just I excerpted the poem here just because I think it's such an enchanting, pun intended, piece of writing that talks about how it felt to go to the cinema as like a physical space and how you're able to lose yourself not just in like an escapist sense, but also like spiritually feel like you're in a different realm and you're able to feel connected and seen by something that is an art form, but also is a space for community.
I think we'll ask one more question and then we'll have to keep going, but please save these questions for the end. Rayanne says, did you also dive into musicals and plays or did you stick to film?
I am really, really into musicals and plays, but I didn't find many materials about them at the archives that I went to. But I did find a lot of screenplays, which made me reflect on different genres and different styles of writing and the restrictions, but also the possibilities that they allow.
Thanks. Thanks, Natalie. Round of applause again for Natalie. And our next presenter, coming from the University of Washington, is Rayan Salam. So Rayan, whenever you're ready, go ahead and share your screen.
Yes.
We've got some fans in the chat.
Perfect. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Rayan, and I went to Rwanda to learn about leadership and nation building in the country. And as I came back, I kind of shifted my research topic to rethinking the path to democracy. So a little bit about me is that I'm a student at the University of Washington. I'm majoring in law, economics, and public policy with a minor in human rights and in science, technology, and society. When I first originally wanted to go to Rwanda, I wanted to research about like how a country can develop so quickly within like such a short amount of time. Rwanda was devastated by a genocide against the Tutsis that took away almost half of their population. So with family in Palestine and everything that's going on right now, I really wanted to know if there was a way for a country to develop and like what other war-torn countries can learn from them. But as coming back, I realized that it was a lot more of like a nuanced topic than I had originally thought. So I kind of shifted my question to think more broadly and a little bit more philosophical about like whether countries could require a period of autocratic regime before shifting to a democracy. Um, yeah. So while I was there, some methods that I had were visiting different sites and organizations that were built to rebuild Rwanda. We visited a lot of places that like fed, that like created meals to feed hospitals and stuff like that. So, and then I observed as I was there just all the time, looking at different interactions between different classes and the way that people live their local life. And then also constantly asking questions to people at the different organizations. We met a lot of really like knowledgeable people that studied outside of Rwanda but came back to develop their country. So it was really interesting to see their point of view about the country and what they think about everything. It was really cool. And the last thing that I did was reading different materials about history. We read anything from Paul Farmer to Mamdani. Like it was just so cool. But it was nice to read about the country and then go to the country and see like how that reading either influences or is not the same as what I was experiencing. Some limitations that I found when I was there were just like it was so hard to converse with locals, especially that I didn't know the language in Rwanda. And a lot of the people that we did talk to were educated outside of Rwanda. So you're not getting like, I guess, like the full immersed experience. So if I had a future opportunity to go back, I would absolutely go back and stay for much longer. I would also stay outside of the general city of Kigali and potentially stay with a host family. I feel like being really immersed in a country like that would give you so much more, like so much more information about the way that people interact with their society there. Um, and then I thought that this topic was really important to figure out or research just because like Rwanda has shaped their country so that it's not, so that their genocide is not their history, is their history and not their culture. And I think that's really interesting to see that like your history does not have to shape the way that you interact with the globe and your country. It gives hope for the future and it shows that development is in fact possible. I think especially in our time now, it's really like net like development is like not something that we're really like entranced with, but it is possible. Another thing about Rwanda is that it is really small and it is really relatively new. And so we have to take some of the things that we learned there and also leave some of the things that we learned there. I don't think that it would really be applicable for a country with a much larger population. Um, but yeah, so some of the findings that I found was that development happens a lot through foreign aid and foreign partnerships, and then also through cooperation locally. Um, Rwanda has so much nationalism with their country. It's so inspiring. They just know what they want to do with their country, and they do it because they all agree with it. Um, so truthfully, I don't really have an answer to my question just yet, but I do think that if we like rethink our definition of autocracy and maybe think that like maybe an autocracy is a council and not just a dictator, but I think that it would be useful for a short period before shifting to a democracy just so that we can develop a country. I think democracy is so important, but it's also really hard to get stuff passed and done when we're going through the entire country who has different opinions, different political ideologies, attitudes, stuff like that. So while yes, democracy is very important, I do think that if we maybe like vote in a leader and give them trust to do what they wish with the country, I think it would be really good for developing countries to have some type of an autocratic regime. And yeah, thank you. That's all.
Very interesting research, Rayanne. Are there any questions on this project or on the travel that Rayanne conducted?
I guess I just had more of a comment almost. I think in the US, uh, democracy is sort of like a hammer you just hit everything with. But I think Lee Kuan Yew, for instance, in Singapore is a really great example how different styles of government can lead to really interesting outcomes. So thank you for your project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oscar asks, are there other historical examples of indigenously led autocratic regimes developing later into a democratic form of government?
Oh, that's a really good question.
That is a good question.
Not that I know of, but I think it's important to also mention that Rwanda is not an autocratic regime and it doesn't have an autocratic regime, but the democracy in the country is so nationalist that it almost like plays as an autocratic regime. So they have so much faith in their president that they like just allow him to do whatever, not like whatever he wants, but like whatever he wants with the country. So I would be really interested to also get an answer to that question. However, I am not sure.
Whereas most of the international funding come from so far.
A lot of it comes from the UK and the US. They give them funds and also partnerships outside of Rwanda in the UK and the US to help develop their country. A lot of the organizations that we met as well also had a lot of different foreign partnerships in the US and the UK. So those are like the two main areas.
Well, thanks, Rayanne. If anyone has any other questions, make sure to ask them at the end of the presentation portion. But up next, we have Audrey Schneider from the University of California, San Diego. Take it away, Audrey.
All right, let's see here. Let's get into present mode. Can you see that all right?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so let's see. All right, starting off. All right. Hi, guys. My name is Audrey Schneider. I'm currently at the University of California, San Diego, currently majoring in marine biology. I'm a fourth year and a part of the Gilbert Lab, which is part of Scripps Institution of Oceanography, one of UCSD's kind of departments. At Dr. Gilbert's lab, we focus on microbiome research. So, what exactly is the microbiome? So, the microbiome refers to
Did she freeze for anybody else?
Frozen for me. Yeah.
Oh,
We might have to come back maybe.
likewise. Have to. Hmm.
and also kind of used as a tool to manipulate the health. So when these ecosystems or when these microbiomes start to become infected with pathogenic bacteria, or like in my case, what I was looking at, like anthropogenic bacteria, so more human associated, it's really like is very detrimental to the host organism itself. So this led to my research question. of, sorry, I'm skipping. So basically, I wanted to be able to understand how urbanization negatively affected the health. I wanted to understand how urbanization, which is the expansion and construction of large cities, affected the coastal coral reef ecosystem, specifically through assessing the microbiome. And so when you're building these cities, there's a lot more pollution and anthropogenic activities that are going on that contribute to the waters and therefore the decline in health. And so this led to my research question, which was, does the microbial community composition of Zoanthus zanzibaricus significantly change as a function of urbanization gradients? So Zoanthus zanzibaricus, what is that? That is the scientific name for one of the prominent organisms that's found across all reef kind of health statuses in Okinawa. So I was able to do 3 different sites in Okinawa. So basically through the support of previous collaboration with my mentor and Dr. James Reimer at the University of the Syracuse, I was able to travel abroad. And here it's a very unique kind of situation in Okinawa because you have this urbanization gradient. They're much more developed in the south and rural areas in the north. And so it really presents this opportunity to look at those kind of as categorized sites. And I also think that just getting to be immersed in this ecosystem that you're looking to study has really invaluable, like gives you invaluable experience for that. And I think to the point that a lot of other people have already mentioned, it just being in your environment that you're studying is super important. And so basically what I did was these little organisms here, these are the Zoanthus zanzibaricus. They're very small colonial organisms. I was able to sample from each of these sites. Whoops, go. Sorry, guys. From each of these sites here, 13 different collected samples from each one, and then these samples get sent off for 16S sequencing, which basically it identifies and amplifies the DNA in your sample. And then these regions that are identified are cross-referenced with a database that are able to tell you what species of bacteria you have that are present in the sample. And so um, for this kind of next steps, well, first of all, preliminary results, like what have I found so far? So far, there's a significant difference between like the low impact site and the medium and high impact sites, which suggests that these organisms and by extension, these ecosystems are really susceptible to shifts in their microbial community composition. So it's is really important because it highlights the need for more monitoring and regulation for carbon dioxide emissions, but also kind of construction equipment and like water waste and nutrient like pollution that comes into the waters. And so being able to track and filter what enters the waters is really important. Um, I think for future research, definitely time series analysis. So my project really sets that foundation for what we're currently seeing, but look like tracking how it changes over time is always important. More sites. I only did those 3 kind of sites, but obviously there's the whole island, there's the whole like global world to kind of look at that you can kind of frame the same question, as well as expanding to other organisms. So Zoanthus zanzibaricus are already kind of understudied organisms in these coral reef systems, and so expanding that to other organisms that are A, understudied, and B, also going to become a lot more prominent and important as kind of climate change impacts these reefs and you see shifts in the taxa that are present and whatnot. So that was my project, and I just have a quick acknowledgement slide, and thank you guys for listening. Yeah.
Oh, really cool stuff, Audrey. Thanks for sharing. We'll have time for one question, but Audrey asks, did you look at other measures of coral reef health to compare between sites? And if so, did they correlate to your microbial findings?
Yes, so the one paper that I kind of had already based my kind of stuff off of and that supported this hypothesis and the idea that these communities would shift is that they looked at the water microbial community composition. So assessing how the water itself is changing. So they did find that there was significant shifts, and those shifts were towards more anthropogenic and pathogenic species of bacteria. So that kind of framed my hypothesis that the organisms would follow that shift as well. Yeah.
Had you researched this specific organism previously, or how did you get interested in them?
Yeah, so I had not actually, funny story, all of my project, I guess I just presented on was not at all the original project proposal. I had originally proposed to work with like species of coral that I had been doing kind of bioinformatics data analysis on already. But when we got to Japan, between like permitting issues and like the timeline of the summer, I wasn't going to be able to sample the coral anymore. And so my PI in Japan had said, hey, this organism is like really starting to be studied a lot more. And I think the other key like limitation for me was that I don't have scientific diver like scuba diving certification, which is really important for them to say, yes, we like feel comfortable sending you off to Japan to kind of go scuba diving. And so I had to come up with a new project that I could just reef walk is what we called it. So all of these organisms are really close to the coast to the point where you literally step off the land, like it's attached, like you're on the coast almost on the beach collecting. So no, I had never experienced these before, but I do love them. And from the pictures, like they're so cute, and they come in all different kinds of colors too. So yeah, I had a really great time.
I agree. They are really cute. All right. Thank you, Audrey, so much for a fascinating project. Moving on to our next presenter, we have Emmanuel Fabian from the University of Missouri in Kansas City. Emmanuel, I'll let you share your screen.
Oh, am I sharing my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. All right. So so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Fabian, and I'm a Spanish and Film and Media Arts major at UMKC. And so this past summer, I carried out my project, the purpose of which was to demonstrate the contributions and the positive impact that immigrants can bring to a new country by highlighting the overlooked Nikkei community in Peru. And for those of you who don't know, a Nikkei individual is a Japanese immigrant and their descendants who have created communities in other countries. I am, however, focused on the Nikkei community in Peru as I believe that they had a story worth telling. And this project, it meant a lot to me as my parents themselves are immigrants and they've shown me like the meaning of hard work and dedication. So I chose this topic because of my love for immigrants, Peru and Japan, but most of all, just for the opportunity to create something to honor like all the courageous souls who, fueled by hope, took a risk, abandoned their country, all in exchange for a future and faraway horizons, right? Um, and during my time in Peru, I worked with the Japanese Peruvian Association of Cusco. This is a Japanese education center, and here I interviewed two professors, two of the co-presidents, and later the son of a pioneer Nikkei filmmaker. And I asked them if they could tell me about like the experiences of their grandparents when they first immigrated to Peru from Japan. And the interviews were filmed as I was developing a video project for which I traveled all over Cusco, obtaining B-roll in the countryside, in the rivers, in the city, just about everywhere. And traveling to and within Peru, it helped me immensely as it allowed me to get connected with people who were just spread out. And I was able to find a lot of material that was kind of impossible to find online. And with that being said, it helped me realize that this project was really a part of an even bigger project. And I have also partnered up with Telemundo Kansas City, which is a local Hispanic news station in KC. And they're planning on airing some of the interviews I actually conducted on television later this month and in January. Um, yeah, and I interviewed two individuals who are the daughters of Yokichi Noshi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Who was actually the first mayor of the town of Aguascalientes, and the first Japanese mayor in all of Peru, and quite possibly all of Latin America. I haven't been able to find any other historical record that says otherwise, but I'll let y'all know if I ever do. Yokichi arrived at Peru in 1917 and later moved to Aguascalientes, where upon noticing the lack of infrastructure, he taught the locals how to build their own houses, and he was just so well loved that he was declared mayor by the town. And today there's actually a plaque built in his honor in Japan and in Peru. I additionally interviewed the son of Ohelio Nishiyama. Ohelio was a Nikkei filmmaker that co-directed Kokuli, which is actually the first film that was ever made in the Quechua language. And the history of the Nikkei community is important to note because they are just a shining example that with dedication, you can really overcome any obstacle, as a journey that they set out on really seemed kind of impossible for an immigrant, an outsider to do. But you know, they persevered, they accomplished their goals, and now especially I believe this is something that immigrants and descendants of migrants should be reminded of. And the Nikkei community, they just serve as a beacon of hope to foreigners who are just full of self-doubt, right? And I hope to return to Peru. I hope to return to continue my research with the Japanese Peruvian Association in Lima now being the goal. I traveled mostly in Cusco, but that is my presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Emmanuel. Lots of applause. Are there any questions for Emmanuel about his project or his travels?
I was wondering if there's any Nikkei film that you didn't touch on here that you think were valuable to your research or that are just pieces of art you really admire.
Definitely pieces of art. The filmmaker, he was also a photographer, and he spent a good portion of his life doing a lot of photography. And I interviewed his son, and so I was able to also see some of the photos and some of the photos that I included on the slideshow. I borrowed them from them. Yeah, but yeah, me as a photographer also like I guess I had a lot of extra appreciation for lack of a better term, but yeah.
What was the draw for the original Nikkei immigrants from Japan to Peru? Was there a certain draw or incentive encouraging the transition, or was it more of an individualized reason?
Yeah, so initially, and I want to say it was around 1899, around that time. So in Japan at the time, they were putting up like propaganda posters. They were telling people, hey, in this country in the Andes region, you can go and you can make a lot of gold, you can make a lot of money. And they were just like advertising Peru so much that a lot of men they just set out, I think it was in April, and they came to, go work in like the fields and the mines, and they quickly found out, and this is now going more, kind of going a little deeper, but they quickly found out that it wasn't exactly as how it was advertised, and a lot of the working conditions were a little difficult, really difficult. Some people unfortunately died and others moved back. But over the years, because some people decided to stay, um, more people moved to Peru. And I can talk so much about like the 40s because there's a lot of World War II stuff that happened throughout there, but but yeah, I can just talk. I can keep talking, but I can save it for another question.
Oscar asked, is it common Peruvians of Japanese descent to hold political power in Peru?
Um, well,
There's also low-key a question about Fujimori.
oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, so recently, yeah, well not so recently, but Fujimori, he was a president in Peru. I think I want to say less than a year ago. I can't remember exactly when, but he actually, I think he passed away. But he was a very, if I remember correctly, because I talked to some people in Peru about him, and a lot of people, they had a lot of mixed feelings, of course, about him because of just a lot of corruption. But from what I remember them telling me is that when he started his campaign, he was really like emphasizing like the fact that he was Japanese, and he was really like there's actually a photo I didn't include in the presentation, but where it's actually him in like a samurai suit. So there was a bit of like I want to say like some of the Japanese Peruvians, they were kind of like I want to say hopeful, and they seemed like, hey, this guy seems pretty cool, you know. But I'd say as time moves on, I think it's going to be more common to see people from other countries and, positions of power, political influence, right?
Excellent. Thanks, Emmanuel. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep moving on, even though there are still more questions. If you want to answer those in the chat, feel free to. But up next, we have Oscar Lenahan Sue from William and Mary. If you would like to share your screen and present, Oscar.
I'm trying to remember where the share screen feature is. Oh, it's the thing.
Green
It's
button.
there.
Yeah.
All right, great. Um, so my name is Oscar. I'm a student at William and Mary. I'm a senior in History and European Studies and as Tyler Fellow. And this summer I went to Germany and I conducted some research in some archives on the development of settler colonial ideology in the German Empire. Um, I I mean, Germany was a colonial power. A lot of people don't think about it because it was a very late bloomer in the colonial game. It came around in the 1880s and it only lasted until the beginning of World War One. So there's not a lot of historical memory about these German colonies, especially since they were so dispersed and not as large as the British or the French. But the German legacy in these places is incredibly important. And I think there are still ramifications in the history of Germany itself that make this an interesting and really dense topic to cover. I'm mostly focusing on the colony in Southwest Africa, which is the country of Namibia today. Namibia's got a really interesting history in of itself. It had a lot of contact with the Cape Colony in the 17th, 18th century before the Germans came. They wanted to be a British protectorate. Some people in Namibia wanted to be a British protectorate before the Germans came. But the Germans got it. They actually were occupied by South Africa after World War One. They were occupied for 75 years before Namibian independence, which didn't come until 1990, around the end of apartheid. So they obtained parts of Southwest Africa in 1883, and 20 years later, Germany commits a genocide. This is another reason why this is an interesting topic, because there's been a lot of discussion in like Holocaust research and genocide research about the genocide Germany committed in Southwest Africa. They killed about up to 80% of one Herero ethnic group and about 40 to 50% of the Nama ethnic group in the country. Completely devastating, completely annihilated those societies as they had existed. And it was all in the name of this sort of German settler colonial project where they would bring in Germans who would take cattle from these people and set up their own large ranching farms, kind of similar to Australia in a lot of ways. So my research is more about how are these events received in Germany? Why was a settler colony established in Southwest Africa? And how did the scholarship on sort of settler colonial thought change between the 1870s and 1914? And also sort of racial thought about Africans. How has that changed over the course of the period, especially after the genocide? So in order to do that, I went to Frankfurt am Main. Frankfurt am Main is the fifth most populous city in Germany. It has one of the most infamous train stations in Europe. It's known for having a lot of drug addicts outside of it. and it's the European finance capital. And there was a colonial archive at the Goethe-Universität in Frankfurt. So I got a lot of primary source documents from the Goethe-Universität, from the Colonial Bibliothek. And yeah, so I was in Germany for about a month and a half in the summer. And I got a lot of resources. And so it's all part of a continuing honors that project. I'm still working on the first chapter. By the end of it, I'll have a full 100 or so page thesis document for my senior thesis. And that's, yeah.
Thanks, Oscar. Any questions from the audience about this project? I think I have a question of, now that you've conducted this study in Germany, any interest in extending this to Namibia?
Right, that's a good question. No, because I won't be able to go there by the time I need to actually finish the thesis. So, and also a lot of the documents that are in Namibia are government documents, which are not what I'm working with. I'm specifically, can I stop sharing my screen? I'm sorry. My computer's about to die. Okay. No, I mean, I would love to go to Namibia for the research, and that would have been very helpful over the summer, but I could not afford the second plane ticket to go to Africa. That is on the other side of the planet,
Understood.
to Germany. Oh,
I'm going to keep rolling along with the presentations, but please, Oscar, feel free to answer the questions. They're really interesting questions that are coming up in the chat if you want to reply to those. Our next presenter is Lasya Kandavali from the University of Texas at Austin. Lasya, go ahead and share your screen when you're ready.
Thank you. I'll go ahead. Can you see my screen okay?
Looks like it's trying to load. There we go. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, hi everyone. My name is Lasya Kandavali, and today I'm presenting on my research, which is how extreme heat affects small businesses and small business owners in Ahmedabad, India. So I'm currently a senior at UT Austin, and I wanted to learn about South Asian lived experiences in relation to extreme heat and climate change. That's why I started my project. So Ahmedabad experiences severe heat waves with temperatures regularly exceeding 40 degrees Celsius about. During monsoon season, humidity drives wet bulb temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius. So these temperatures are approaching dangerous thresholds, especially for outdoor workers. Maximum temperatures are projected to increase in the following decades due to climate change, both amplifying the frequency and duration of heat waves. So my research questions were, how does the increasing frequency and severity of heat waves in Ahmedabad affect climate resilience among socioeconomically vulnerable populations? And what are the existing adaptive strategies, coping mechanisms, and citywide measures amongst these populations during heat wave events? So we used a mixed methods approach, surveying about 90 to 100 small business owners, including street vendors, tailors, mechanics, and artisans, all from different sectors, and we asked them about heat-related health impacts, customer and sales performances, and climate coping strategies. We conducted interviews and focus group discussions with vendors to understand their lived experiences in relation to climate change, and we also placed temperature sensors in actual workplaces to measure heat conditions and wet bulb temperatures and run those numbers to see how hot it really is in those workplaces. What we found was that more than 80% of respondents experienced declining sales and customer footfall due to extreme heat. 40% reported spoilage and loss of perishable goods. Most critically, 85% of respondents reduced meals for their families due to heat-related income loss, and 80% struggled to afford nutritious food. This reveals serious food insecurity during heat wave events. I feel like we don't really associate heat waves with food insecurity being the most direct health impact, but that was a very surprising find. We also documented some specific adaptations. As you can see here, there's umbrellas and shades that people have been implementing in order to combat the heat however they can. Some small business owners had whitewashed roofs and installed solar fans, achieving about 15 to 20% temperature reductions. Others adjusted their work hours to cooler morning and evening slots. However, many lack the resources for these solutions, and this also impacts their businesses as well. So the bottom line is that small businesses in India are on the front lines of climate change, yet remain largely invisible in policy discussions. The most impactful part of doing research in India was seeing the level of community interaction and networks that emerged. My study prompted me to reframe a certain way of thinking about urban spaces and people, to see Indian streets as cultural corridors themselves with an obvious exchange of and flow of goods, services, and social interaction. And street vendors, who are often overlooked, are actually the essence of these cultural corridors and should be part of the conversation regarding climate change. These small business owners are embedded in the cultural and urban landscape, and this framework serves as a critical part of the creation of policies that respond to vulnerable communities' needs. And that is it for my presentation. Just wanted to thank everyone and the support.
Thank you, Lasia. That was fantastic. Are there any questions that she can answer? Oh. Curious where the heat wave is leading clients to instead, bigger indoor businesses that can afford rent and AC?
Yeah, so a lot of these small businesses usually sell goods or services, and people tend to trend to more expensive goods and services in grocery stores and like more commercialized markets. And those are typically foreigner influenced. So it's not helping the local economy at all. It's not helping local citizens. It takes money out of the city and into the pockets of foreign investment.
Interesting. If there are any other questions for Lasia, feel free to put them in the chat. How did you connect with your participants?
Yeah, so I did this in collaboration with the All India Disaster Mitigation Institute. And they're a local nonprofit in Ahmedabad who have already been working with small businesses. And so a lot of the time, very similar to a previous study someone mentioned, we would go out with connections, community partners that we would know, and conduct our interviews. And then we would see someone else that was also, a small business on the street, and then just kind of like hop from one to the next, collecting stories. And it's a really effective way to like participate in this cultural corridor that I'm talking about.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lasia, for sharing.
Thank you.
Our penultimate presenter is Magnus Chanel from SUNY Oneonta. Magnus, please go ahead and share your screen.
Hello. Hold on. Let me know if you guys could see this.
We can see it.
Okay, let me make sure. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Magnus Chanel. I'm a music industry major with the audio arts production minor at SUNY Oneonta, and I had the pleasure of studying in Burgos, Spain last summer under the advisement of Dr. Adam Kent at the Burgos International Music Festival. My research topic was Música Española, bridging the gap between folk music and art music in Spain. A little background on me: I'm a performing and recording multi-instrumentalist. I perform all around the New York tri-state area with my performing act, The Witch, where I play guitar and keyboard. I also have been playing piano since the age of 7. My research topic relates to me personally because music is something that's a massive part of my life and offers me a vehicle for expression beyond what any words can express. It's a journey I've been on for most of my life, which is understanding music of the past and bridging it to a modern context. People tend to think of classical music as being the complex work of highly educated musicians. It's generally notated so that it can be conserved and reproduced, like the script of a play, for example. Folk music, on the other hand, is the original popular music. It's music of everyday people, which is shared orally and widely used in domestic life. I wanted to explore a link between these two traditions and figure out if the classical music of a particular culture could reflect the popular traditions of that same demographic. Part of what made this experience in Burgos special as well as necessary for my research was the complete immersion in Spanish culture and, in turn, music. In the context of Spanish culture, Burgos is an extremely relevant city with many historical landmarks like the Cathedral of St. Mary of Burgos, the Plaza Mayor, and the Arco de Santa Maria. The center of the city culminates in a castle on a hill, partly destroyed by the Napoleonic reign, but the walls surrounding the old city center still exist and have been modernized. This offers a different type of preservation that is truly unique to Burgos. This almost modern day interpretation of the old city is something that inspired me and holds true to my research question about understanding traditional culture and music in a modern context. It was 2025, but I felt as if I were walking through history. Burgos is also an important stop along the Camino de Santiago, the pilgrimage route to Santiago de Compostela, which is one of the most important sites of Catholic faith. To see scallop shell medallions in the pavement of Burgos showing pilgrims the route to the Camino de Santiago all made me feel more connected to this ancient cultural tradition. The Burgos International Music Festival offered so many musical experiences to be had as well. One of the unique features of this program is its emphasis on Spanish music through lectures, concerts, and guided walking tours. Whether I was watching truly remarkable pianists and string players perform extensive masterpieces or the music seminar course, Música Española, where Dr. Kent would go over the many different origins and influences of Spanish classical music, I knew I was getting a unique musical education that was simply unavailable to me in Oneonta. My time in Burgos also offered me countless hours of practice time to immerse myself further into this foreign culture. During my time in Burgos, I studied a lot of classical music, but I also took in lots of folk music as well. There was an international folk music festival right outside the conservatory where I was studying, where people would perform folk music from all around the world, literally in the street. This just so happened to coincide with my research question, which was studying and analyzing two pieces of Spanish classical music. One of which, Spanish Dance Number 6 by Enrique Granados, is directly inspired by folk dancing, which is the sort of activity I was seeing in the street. The other piece, El Lago, or The Lake, by Federico Maupo, is more artistic and inspired by the sort of scenery I enjoyed on our day trip to Basque County. There it is, right there. One of my takeaways from this experience is that composers use the techniques of classical music to capture and transmit the feelings of folk music, the sights and the sounds of this particular people. The instruction I received at the Burgos International Music Festival helped give me the skills to incorporate all the impressions of the local culture and landscapes of Spain into my own music making. And I come away with a heightened appreciation of how these composers used the language of Western art music to make the culture of a faraway place and a remote time relevant to me and to audiences in the year 2025. Thank you for your time. That's it.
Thank you, Magnus. What a poetic presentation. Any questions from the audience about this project? Put them in the chat or unmute yourself or just wait until the end when we open it up to everybody. Oh, we do wish we could have heard you perform.
Yeah, that was the plan, was initially to have this be a performance, which would have been awesome. But
please, yeah, feel free to share any video links to your performance. Kate asked, did you find any? Oh, sorry.
No, could I put the video performance in the chat? Because I have a YouTube link that I could send.
Please, absolutely. Did you find that music surpassed the language barrier?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I don't speak Spanish, but it put the music in a context where I'm just looking at notes on a page. There's no real like context or influence to that, and like actually being in the space that these people were inspired by was really moving.
And how large was the audience that you performed for?
Probably about 100 people. It was pretty cool. It was like it was the International Folk Festival was like promoting the stuff, and they had a lot of different recitals throughout.
So cool. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Magnus, for sharing. We'll move to our final presentation of the evening from Nikhil Stewart from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So Nikhil, please share your screen.
Cool. Thank you so much. Okay, let me see. Okay, is this showing up?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. Okay, hello, my name is Nikhil Stewart. I represent the University of Hawaii Manoa Department of Religions and Ancient Civilizations and the Political Science Department. Um, First of all, thank you to the Tyler Center for Global Studies and undergraduate research opportunities back at University of Hawaii. Without that, this project could not have been possible. My research project this summer is called Digital Dharma, Tibetan Buddhism and Social Media in the Kathmandu Valley, Nepal. The basic sort of research question I wanted to find out was, is social media affecting Buddhist lifeways in Tibetan Buddhist lifeways in the Kathmandu Valley, based on some preliminary um, research the year before, uh, where I had sort of seen various lamas and monks using social media. Okay, so I spent roughly more or less 3 months in the Kathmandu Valley. I also enrolled in a Sanskrit language program that was adjacent to a Buddhist monastery, and I interviewed about 30 monks and deeply embedded community members. Um, Including some focus groups among the 30 participants. In terms of results, immediately the most striking result was that every single monastic interviewed used social media, despite it not being a prerequisite for study participation. So that was something I was completely not expecting to find. Um, and overall, I characterize the sort of relationship of social media and Tibetan Buddhism as between refuge and risk. So some things that were surprising is that social media is used heavily now in monastic education, and sometimes you need to have applications like WhatsApp, like YouTube to watch Dharma lectures or educational lectures, or share links and stay connected with monastic groups. But there's also, much like we're seeing all over the world, high rates of what the monks self-reported as addiction to apps like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and the like. And so and then also a week and a half before I left, there was a revolution in Nepal, and it was largely organized through Discord, where they voted in their interim prime minister. So there's a lot happening. I sort of talk about this technology as being infrastructurally important for monastic communities and the wider Nepal context. I extend media philosopher Marshall McLuhan, who, and I say that social media sort of marks a fissure in previous media technologies, like the internet or books, etc., in that with machine learning algorithms, the media actively or acts as an agent to shape the audience to be more dependent on the technology so that the technology can sell its attention to advertising companies. And in this way, it's directly contradictory to monastic purposes of being sort of detached and um, able to pick up very subtle states of consciousness and of mind. So, uh, in any case, if you want to know more about this project, or I'm writing a larger article on it that I'm hoping to publish to the Journal of Global Buddhism, feel free to reach out and contact me here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nikhil. That was great. Are there any questions? Ooh, special shout out appreciation to Nikhil, since I think it is about 5 in the morning. Yeah, definitely. He gets the Trooper
Yeah,
Award.
411. It's I'm in India right now visiting some family after my research.
A very cogent presentation for the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah.
I had a
Also,
question. Oh,
oh yeah, yeah, go for it.
no, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say, last year I was in Kolkata, India, where am now last summer for a language program, and one day it was 44 degrees Celsius or like 100 and almost 20 in monsoon weather, so it
Oh,
was lovely.
delightful.
It was the worst, yeah. You
My
walk for 10
question,
minutes.
my
Yeah, sorry,
question for
sorry.
you
You
was,
go. Yeah.
what is just like your personal connection to this topic? It has some sort of spiritual nature, so.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good question. You know, I was not expecting to do this project before I did a language program last summer in Kolkata. I visited a friend, Rachel C. She studies Buddhism, and she went to her undergrad in Nepal, and she was doing some field research. She has really cool research in high altitude deserts in the Himalayas. And we went for a hike, and I saw like, an 8 day hike away from the nearest road, villagers like laying in fields, scrolling on TikTok. And then when we were in Kathmandu, like at cafes and things, like one monk would be scrolling on their phone, and then another one chanting prayers and beads. And then I don't know, I study Sanskrit in university and I read a lot of Buddhist texts. So I've been growing more interested in Buddhist studies, I suppose. And then this sort of project just came together like that.
Interesting. Did you get a sense from any participants that they wish to ban social media or remove it from monastic practice entirely?
Yeah, I mean, some of the monasteries tried. I mean, it's difficult because they were saying that. So one of the monasteries tried to institute a ban, but there are a couple problems with that. One is like they found that younger monks were just using the tech, they're kids like anyone else, and so they'll just use the technology outside or sort of be sneaky with it, and it ended up being just kind of like futile to institute. And then also like for these monasteries, they don't have too many resources sometimes for education. A lot of these monks come from poor families or are orphans at times. And so the ability to access the wealth of information that's available on the internet is a really, really potent benefit. Um, but oh, and then COVID was a big part of this too, where they just sort of they needed to use Zoom and distance, and that was a big catalyst as well. So all of these compiling factors make it very difficult
Mhm.
to institute this.
Interesting. Blake says, how is Nepalese digital infrastructure and can it support the growth needed in social media?
Yeah, this is a great question. This is something I had like a whole tangent that I had to condense down, but essentially, shocking. It's shocking how good the infrastructure is, even in Himalayan hiking areas. Like you can be on Everest Base Camp now and WhatsApp family. So Nepal has worked especially with various government organizations, partially also the US and China's Belt and Road initiatives. Um, so the short answer is since 2021, the average Nepali citizen could afford a data plan and a phone. Maybe slightly about like middle class Nepali. Um, and most monks by 2021 could really afford a phone and get Wi-Fi. There's still like in rural areas, there's still definitely disparity, but it's rapidly accelerating.
Fascinating. Well, thanks so much for sharing. And everyone, round of applause. I mean, I feel like I just learned too many things for too many lifetimes, but that was so cool. And again, the digital program, which has been linked in the chat, details these projects and the projects of the entire cohort. So to wrap up this event and to end on a high note, I just want to ask a few fun questions and feel free to jump in. Maybe we could do one or two responses per question, but what advice would you give to an undergraduate who wants to pursue their own global research project? Please feel free to just unmute yourself and go for it.
Just do
Yeah.
it.
Just
Do
do
it.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Just talk to your professors. Yeah, the only reason I was able to do any of this research is because I got onto my professor, and she and one of her colleagues is friends with that professor I mentioned in my presentation. So it's like 3 degrees of separation.
It's who you know
I would
for
say
networking.
pick something you're passionate with, and then the research will come to you, you know.
Yeah, great advice.
I
That's
might.
perfect.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. You can go first.
oh, I was just gonna say, be prepared to do a lot of paperwork and itemized budgets and things like that as well. But it's worth it.
The not so fun part. Emmanuel, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just gonna say what Magnus said. That's spot on. Like, if you find that thing that you're just passionate about, like your heart's in it, and like if you do something that's you're not as interested in, I feel like you might not get the results that you want. But definitely, if your heart's in it, and I mean, ask all the questions that you need to. Sometimes you might think, they're kind of dumb, or you might feel nervous or scared to like go abroad, but you just gotta do it because like you can't let because feelings are temporary. Like at the end of the day, whether it's fear, happiness, you gotta control them. I guess in this case, to do something big, or at least that's my experience.
Capitalize on the opportunity. Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah, I would also say like don't be afraid to like change your research topic.
Oh
I
yeah.
guess like, for me, like I really knew what I wanted to research when I went there, and then my question like found me. So definitely like don't like box yourself into like one specific like I'm going to research this. Like always stay open-minded.
Yeah, and Audrey said something cool in the chat. Don't be afraid to be interdisciplinary with it. Um, if you need to pivot, if you need to bring in more perspectives, that's great advice. Last question for me is now that I know some of these projects have some preliminary results, but now that you're kind of rounding out this experience, um, what are the next steps and how is doing research and specifically research in a foreign country equipped you with skills to do whatever you're setting out to do next?
I think for me, I was obviously in such a different cultural context than my own. And so to be in a different country and to navigate it and walk out of it and come home and be like, yeah, I learned something out of this and it was a good experience, that gave me a lot of confidence in terms of moving forward with research and the ability to travel independently elsewhere and sort of be an independent adult post-graduation as well.
Nice, good one.
I think for next steps, of all the presentations we've heard from today, they're so profound in so many unique ways. I feel like, at least for me, my job is to now communicate the results, communicate the voices and the like experiences and the perspectives that I've learned. Um, and kind of expose people on this side of the world to what's going on in other places, just to like broaden our audiences over here, and get them thinking about lived experiences that happen elsewhere. I feel like is my personal next step forward.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait to see what comes from this, whether you're publishing digitally in an article in a journal. Please make sure you're sending us whatever you put out into the world, and we'll happily share it with our networks. Are there any questions, lingering questions from the audience? Big idea questions, really specific project questions? All right. Well, I think that is the conclusion of the virtual summit. Round of applause. Once again, I'm very just so pleased that you guys took this opportunity to share your findings with just the broader public. And I know you're going to continue to do that at your own institutions and if you continue in your research career. So just make sure that you're sharing it with the Tyler Center so we can continue to brag about you. But thank you for our audience attendees for coming to this event. We have recorded the event. If you would like the recording, we'll send it out. You can share it with friends, family, colleagues. And yeah, that's it from the Tyler Center.
I'll just put a final plug in for check out all the research of all of our other amazing Tyler Fellows who didn't get the chance to present live today, but great research that they have in our online portal.
Yes.
And thanks to everyone and especially to Carrie for doing such a good job emceeing and organizing today's event.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening or a good morning wherever you are.
Just want to echo, thank you so much, Carrie. You're wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank all y'all.
Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Gary.
Thank you.
See ya. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess I can go ahead and end the meeting now.
Sounds good. Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah.